Hi everybody and welcome to my first tarot video. My name is Nyx, which is short for Nicola, and it's spelled N-Y-X, like the goddess for night. So first of all, let me talk you through a little bit of how I got into tarot. So let's get into where it started for me. My dad was a magician and tarot reader. He did mind magic, children's entertainment, all those sort of things, but also read tarot for many, many years. I think at least since the early 80s. And this was his main deck, this Tarot Classic, which is still readily available, mass market. I think they might have changed the font to something a bit more swirly, but basically it's the same deck. There's a card left in there. He didn't have the guidebook anymore by the time he passed it on to me, but I'm guessing he didn't really need it. So I did, however, purchase this full guidebook, because although I had the meanings, I was seeing a lot of people saying, oh, Tarot de Marseille, it's very different to the Rider-Waite-Smith system, but I was finding that when I started the Rider-Waite system that it really wasn't that different. So I wanted to go back into here and see what the official meanings were. So let's pick a card. Let's pick, I don't know, one of my favourite cards. Of course I can't find it now. There we go. The Two of Cups, isn't that beautiful? We've got the two cups, the heart-shaped dolphins, and the kind of thyrsus type thing going through the circled sun, as well as some pipes celebrating all of this. Now, of course, this is known in the Golden Dawn system as the Lord of Love. So let's see, well, what does Tarot Classic have to say in this book? Two of Cups. Divinatory meaning, first word, love. Friendship, beginning or renewed. Passion, union, engagement, understanding, cooperation, partnership, and marriage. And if we look through some other meanings in here too, Nine of Swords, misery, concern, quarrel, unhappiness, miscarriage, anxiety over a loved one, worry, despair, suffering. Now I'd say it's also sort of nightmares, isn't it? But effectively we've got very much the same thing going on here. Anyway, back to this deck. So my father passed this on to me just a few years ago, and it came at a time that was good for me, because when I was younger I was a little bit cynical about tarot and the magic, and people saying, oh, your father, he can read everything that's going on in your mind. And I thought, well, he can't, he doesn't even know where his keys are. But of course we all have different intuitive skills, and I think, like my father, mine are more about the grander emotional, spiritual sides of life, not so much the practical things that some other people may be better at reading for, which is why we forget where we left our keys. So that's that one, and I made a nice little I do like for my special decks that I might be carrying around, and because I don't want to destroy that tuck box anymore, it being quite sentimental, I make these little things out of felt just to keep them nice and safe. And with my pouches, ideally I don't want decks slopping around. I'm not so keen on drawstring pouches, because I find that the strings catch on things if you put them in a bag, you know, then looped itself around something, and you take the deck out and you've got a bunch of keys that you probably couldn't find. So that's how it helps you find them. But anyway, so that's that one. Then the other deck I use was the first deck I bought for myself, which is a centennial edition of the Rider-Waite-Smith, which people are probably familiar with, and I keep that in a special box because that is my real priority reading deck. I would say if I'm doing some readings for other people, this may be one. It's not always the one I use, but it's often this one. And I keep my little key in there. So I do like keys, as you will see from the name of my channel, Key Features, and it's also my family name. So yeah, we like to think of ourselves as either having the keys or we've found them after looking for a very long time through all of the drawers. So there we go. There's that one. And then the other one that I use, which was my dad's second deck. This isn't his copy. My husband actually bought me this copy, but my dad still has one of these, and he also read with this particular deck for many years now. What does it say? Of course, people who've into tarot for a long time are probably very familiar with this deck, but for people who are thinking about it, this one says artistically high tarot cards from the 19th century in a loving reproduction. The 1JJ Swiss Tarot is an older style of tarot deck, a Marseille variant. The cards are reprints of early woodcut designs, printed in black and coloured with blocks of red, blue, green and yellow. And the reason it's called 1JJ is the JJ stands for Juno and Jupiter, who replace, and I do like to keep my decks in correct order when I finished using them for a certain period. Oh, you probably hear a siren there. I do live in Tottenham, so we do get quite a lot of noise. So yeah, instead of the High Priestess, we get Juno, and instead of the Hierophant, we get Jupiter. And my understanding is that it wasn't so much anti-clerical sentiment as anti-Catholic sentiment. They didn't want to have a pope or even a female pope in those positions because they weren't getting down too well with the Catholics at the time. So however, that's also a pit deck, and I would say a very good one to start with. And for me, I like reading with pips because there's a certain level of openness and clarity with them that you don't always get with fully scenic decks. You've got symbolism, you've got geometry that's blocking or allowing the passage of certain energies. I don't use numeral, I don't start adding things up like, because it's effectively the geometry of this card that's telling me something. I might notice resonances in terms of twos appearing, or if this were to appear and the High Priestess, then you've got a resonance there because the High Priestess is the second number 2 in the major arcana. Those sort of resonances speak to me. Now, another part of my practice has been making my own tarot deck, which of course I now can't get into because I've fastened it far too securely with this little decapitated shiver head. I do have Indian ancestry, and I also like to include some Hindu deities and particularly tantric energies into my practice. Separately, I do a mantra to goddess Baglamukhi, but I'm not going to talk about that here because you're here for the tarot. But yeah, I made this little guy along with a few others. I made a Kali with his decapitated heads, and it's really a metaphor for the losing one's ego in a sense of becoming one with everything. Anyway, so again, I probably shouldn't go too much into that. Let me show you this, and another little bag, and I like to put little bits of scented card with certain oil in there. That smells nice, just to bring a fragrance to the deck. I don't put the oil directly onto things. You have to be a bit careful because you don't want oil going onto your cards. And then I also have a little pebble with some special circles on that I got from a beach in Cornwall. Sort of these overlapping circles. I'll try to keep that in there. And this was a deck that I made, so I used my 1JJ deck as a template because I do like the size of these cards. They fit in the palm nicely. You can do a good large spread without crowding your table too much. And I do recommend making a deck for yourself. I made these from greetings cards and old calendars, and just used a scalpel and scissors to make the shape, and then to make the backs I bought some scrapbook paper. Obviously I got a pattern which is not even, so you will get different backs, but I quite like that. Obviously you might not want to do that, but so these are my cards. It's quite a big deck because the greetings cards all added up to quite a lot of thickness, and I do rather love her. And of course there's not so much stress with these, because although you do become attached to particular cards and think, well, I wouldn't want to lose it. If I do lose one, I can make a replacement, so there's that benefit. And of course this deck is completely unique to my energies. It has little messages from the greeting cards that are kind of glued inside, and I do think it's very magical, so I would recommend that as a project. To once you start getting into being confident enough with how you interpret certain cards, you can start making them. And if you later think, oh, I don't really resonate with that one anymore, you can just replace it, can't you? Just make sure you've got enough of the back that you want to keep in case you change your mind. Or you could even just reuse the card and stick a different picture on the front. Anyway, so that's my little deck. I call that Days of the Little Donkey because the fool is a donkey from a Christmas card. And the fool has those funny little ears, doesn't he? Now, in terms of deck collecting, I am relatively new to the party. But I did find once I opened the floodgates to deck walkthroughs, I was buying silly amounts of decks, in my book anyway. You know, having just slowly maybe got one or two, suddenly you're like, oh, I love that, love that, love that. And it does become very contagious, doesn't it? And I don't really want to be a tarot collector, really. I'm a tarot user, so I don't really want a load of decks that are basically there just because I thought, oh, that's good to have in my collection as sit on the shelf or whatever and look at occasionally. I don't know where's it. So anyway, I've got this, there it is. To contain myself, I decided I would limit myself to the number of decks that there are on a standard tarot deck, which is 78. And so basically I've made stickers and so that I can change these, because I'm going to try and do a one in, one out policy. So basically what I do when I get a new deck is I do a deck interview and I assign it an energy, or rather it tells me what its energy is. And here, for example, I've got the Mythic Tarot, including spare, with new artwork, because I did cheat a bit there. I have got the original and also the version with the newer artwork. But I put those sort of things all in one card, and that is assigned to the Fool. And I've still got a lot of deck interviews to do, but for example, we've got Circe there. So I think that's a really good way to have your decks organised, and I do think if you can get these very easily, DIY tarot. There's probably various versions, but this one I find quite good. Or you could just make one, couldn't you? Like I made my other deck, but frankly it wasn't that expensive. I thought just save myself a bit of time. And it even comes with instructions in case you've forgotten what the cards mean. But I'll probably make a bag for this once I get it a bit further along. And I might even start sticking bits of artwork on or writing the astrological correspondences on, which brings me to another thing. So, how do I work with decans? Well, to me, I don't do a decan walk as such. To me, the decans are just like, it's basically the calendar, isn't it? So just as I don't say, oh, I do a calendar walk, they're there. It's just going to happen. It's going to come round. So it's going to influence us whether we know about it or not. It's always going to be Tuesday, isn't it? It's always going to be the Eight of Cups decan. So I also don't have a wheel because personally I find the wheel a bit confusing, because in the geometry of it, or rather not confusing but not that useful, in the geometry of a wheel you've naturally got very narrow bits in the middle, haven't you, and wider bits on the outside. And if you've got a wheel like this, the middle bit, you can't really write everything on that you want to fit in there. So you end up with all these little arrows pointing at what things you might want. So for me, what's much more useful is to have it all written down like you would have in your calendar, in your diary. So I have my decan here, decan 1, Mars in Aries, whether it's cardinal, all of those sort of things. I'm not going to go through the details because I'm sure there's plenty of other people that do these things much better than I do. But so there, it's on 2 sides, and then I can also look at my planets that are in fall, or so for example the domicile planets. I know I can just quickly see, and I know them really, but it's a reminder that Mars is domicile in Aries. That's across all the decans. Exalted in Aries is also the Sun, which has almost the same strength as Mars. Then I also have my planets which their sign is detrimental to. So Venus, for example, we know it's detrimental, so that's why we have all that masculine fire energy going on in Aries, really. And then also any fall planets that there might be, which in the case of Aries is Saturn. So, you know, you've got fewer boundaries, and you just have to look at the natural world to see everything expanding and kind of fighting it out and breeding, and there's not much Saturn going on at all. So that's what and I also have in this little special green turtle book all my cards as well. So I like to write in the name, the RWS name, the Golden Dawn name, the tote name, and any particular decks that I feel are special that I want to have the names there, such as my William Blake deck, which has quite unusual names. So I might put all of that in there. And I also have a few numerological things, anything else that I think is useful for a list. And then that brings me to my deck interviews, which is how I assign my decks to my meta tarot here, how I decide what energy it has and what card it should correspond to in my meta deck. And I'll just show you how I do a deck interview. I won't show you the whole thing because it does take a bit of time and you don't really need to see that, but maybe I'll show you with this new deck that I just got in. This came from the lovely Oneness Emporium, and I didn't actually realise that it was a new out deck. I just saw it and I absolutely, winter is my season, and I'm also fascinated by the by Charlemagne, and because it feeds into the whole Arthurian age of chivalry, it was all just various subjects that are right up my street. So I got this. I'll just show you a few of the cards. Magician, High Priestess, Empress, Emperor. Anyway, then before I start, and I've done this already so I don't need to do it again, I cleanse my area with clary sage, because I don't work with smudging. I work with essential oil of sage. I'm a water person, and I do this 9 times to all the cardinal points, and up and down. And then I also have a tapping ritual with the deck, which I've also already done. It's taps 9 times round. Oh, I mean, you don't need to know all this because it's very particular to me. But then I will shuffle the deck. I'm just going to show you quickly. Normally I would shuffle it a bit better than this. And also, just to say to people, I don't do riffle shuffling. My dad, who was a magician, did it all the time, and I sort of associate it with kind of street entertainment and showmanship, so I don't really like that energy in my tarot. But if you want to do a really good shuffle and with a deck that hasn't been shuffled, it's good. You can just do random piles like this, and then you basically get the piles, mix them up more, and you'll find that works better to mix them than riffle shuffling. Because if you think about riffle shuffling, you do this, you riffle it, and then everything that was on the top is still on the top, and everything that was on the bottom is still on the bottom. They might be mixed in an order, but that bottom card is not going to easily get to the top. So I find doing the piles better for that, and then do an overhand. And then I ask my deck questions. So here are the questions I use. What is your root essence? How will we work together? What can our interaction teach? What is your stabilizing influence? How will you challenge me, or where will we disagree? What is your higher purpose aspect? How might you lead me astray? How might you get me back on track? What will you ultimately manifest for me? And how will I know when our time together is done? Now, some decks tell me that we're decks for life and that our time won't be done, but there are other ones that indicate, you know, when this particular thing is happening, then probably it's time for you to move on to something else. But so let's just start with a very obvious one, and this is how I decide what card is coming out for me as well. What is your root essence? See, that one's poking out. Okay, 2 of Cups. Now, isn't that nice? And that is the Lord of Love, 2 of Cups. Now, that really endears me to this deck immediately. If I had any doubts, I'm thinking 2 of Cups. What's not to love about 2 of Cups? So I will put that in my book. It will probably go on 2 of Cups in my deck. I will ask all the other questions. I'm going to leave this now because it takes too long to go through all the questions. But I usually lay them all out in the answers, turn them up, go through what the answers are, and then I decide on an overarching energy to put into my deck. And I will also keep notes of when I do deck interviews in my journal. So along with all the other things that I journal about in terms of my morning deck pulls. Also for very special decks that I'm working with, I like to copy them and make like a little printout version that I can use to paste. That's the Mythic Tarot. So that's how I do a deck interview. And then basically using the decans, I then decide which decks I'm going to work with that decan. So really it's easy to get quite attached to one deck, and of course you can change it, you can go back if you change your mind, but I really want to try and keep them circulating at this point because I don't want my decks just sitting there. So I choose 3 to 4 to work with. Then next decan, because we're starting with Aries, I thought I would have some Mars energy going on. So I've got the Solabusca Tarot, which I've never read with this, and I thought it's about time I try. I think it's going to be a difficult one because it doesn't adhere to any obvious system, but that is very Mars, because it's all about the sort of growth of the Roman Empire, basically, that came out when they were sort of having the Renaissance and all going back into that. And it's nearly all of the cards are male in here, so I shall be trying that, see how I get on. I still need to do a deck interview with that. I'm a little bit intimidated by that deck, just because it is so different. And it probably knows I am too. And then this one, which I'm not intimidated by at all, and I've already interviewed this one. This is gorgeous. This is a pit deck, which is all about the Titans. And it's because it's the Titans, you know, the Clash of the Titans, I think, was a film that came out when I was a teenager, and to me that is about planetary war, gods at war. And so Mars, Aries, that seemed like a good time to be working with him. That one is a him, isn't it? I'll put that there. And then finally, because I really can't be dealing with all of that male energy all in one go, I am going to use this lovely Children of Astara, which is of course very appropriate because it starts with the equinox, doesn't it? It starts with Persephone's return and Demeter being very happy about it and returning all that beautiful abundance to the earth. And this is a botanical deck. She sort of anthropomorphizes some of the plants, like here. But also the guidebook is just, it really is lovely. It's got little bits of information on the plants, which are all appropriate to the cards, in a little poem. And it just sort of reminds me of flower fairies, which was one of the earliest things that kind of got me into a magical way of thinking, which I sort of maybe lost at some point in my adult life, but I'm returning to now. And yeah, so that's going to be really nice to work with. I shall leave off now because I've gone on and on, but I will make more videos, and I'm sorry if this one was a bit garbled. I'm slightly worried about my SD card running out of storage space, if truth be told. So I've tried to fit in things and not give some of the detail that I probably would have given if I wasn't worried. But anyway, thank you for joining, thank you for watching, and if you like it, thank you for liking, and maybe I will see you again in another video.